welcome back to my channel. If you didn't see my video that I posted at some point last time, it was like a 2-minute video. I haven't had internet for the past month because, as you might be able to tell, due to the different background, I have actually moved to London and therefore I had a month without having any internet, and so unfortunately I couldn't upload this video. So that was what the 2-minute video last time was just about, just so that you guys were aware. But I'm now finally back. I'm filming this well in advance, so I don't actually know when this is going to get posted, so hopefully, fingers crossed, it's 12th of September. But we shall see. So I think I mentioned it in my previous video a couple ago, but I'm sort of sticking with this planning theme. And this week I've decided to do something using a little bit of my knowledge, and I'm looking at sort of the pros and cons of staying both on Disney property when you go on holiday to Walt Disney World and staying off-site. I have done both, and I've done them in various different ways, so that's hopefully going to be something that's quite useful for you if you've maybe just stayed in Disney property before and you've never stayed off-site, or you've done it vice versa, or you've never been at all, and you're just potentially wondering sort of what the differences are and whether you should stay on site, off site, that kind of thing. And then hopefully this video is going to help you guys to sort of make a decision on that, or just perhaps maybe have a little bit of information regarding one or the other. So yes, first off, I will just go through and tell you the hotels that I have stayed at. So in terms of being on Disney property, the very first time that I went, we stayed at the Disney's Yacht and Beach Club. I'm not 100% sure whether it was yacht or whether it was beach, because I was 4, so I can't 100% remember that. But I particularly stayed in that hotel, and that's one of the Epcot resorts, I do believe, because it's only a few minutes and a short walk from Epcot itself. So that's something to bear in mind if that's a park that you particularly like. I've also stayed at the Hyatt Regency Grand Cyprus, however it's pronounced. Stayed there on the second time I went, so I think this will have been about 2001. Again, I wasn't very old, I was 6 or 7 I think at that point, so not very old, but I do actually remember quite a bit about this one as well, and we, I think, used the sort of resort a little bit more, because I definitely do remember there was one day we went riding bikes round sort of the resort itself and past the golf course and things, and that one was definitely more of a relaxed vibe than some of the actual Disney resorts are. Obviously that one is owned by Hyatt, but it's within Disney itself, so that's sort of like a best of both worlds. You don't get sort of the major theming of Disney, but you're on Disney property, so it's quite easy to get around. And the third and final one I've stayed at on property is Animal Kingdom Lodge, and I highly recommend this one if you want to go to Animal Kingdom a lot. It is right at the back of the whole resort, or the whole grounds that Disney own. It's right at the back there alongside Animal Kingdom, so it's a bit of a trek in terms of getting to and from places, but definitely for Animal Kingdom it is a big plus, because it is literally 2 minutes from the car park, so that is pretty good. And so then in terms of properties that I have stayed at off Disney property, again, I've stayed in 3. There's one I'm missing and I can't for the life of me remember which one it is, so I've just ignored it because clearly I won't remember anything from that trip anyway. So the 3 that I have stayed at, Staybridge Suites, which is in Lake Buena Vista, just off I-4, the Clarion Inn Hotel, which is actually directly opposite Crossroads, and also the Fairfield Inn, and I can't remember where the Fairfield Inn is, but I've definitely passed it, so I'm going to assume it's still in the same sort of Lake Buena Vista, Kissimmee area, because that tends to be where we stay. We do stay relatively close to Disney property, obviously, whenever we go, because obviously we want to be around the parks and things, so we never stray too far, but it is sometimes nice to stay off property. So what I think I will do, sort of to better split the video up, is I will just start off with the pros of Disney, because they're almost sort of, they're not exclusive of one another, you know. When I say a pro of one of them, that's obviously the con of the other, if you get what I mean. So I'll just go through the pros of each side, so the pros of staying on property and the pros of staying off property. So I will start with sort of the pros of Disney. So one of the major benefits that you get staying on Disney property, and it sort of encompasses everything I'm going to say, is the convenience. So if you have never been to Orlando, America, anything, then it may be something that's particularly beneficial for you. It just makes it a lot easier for you. It's a lot more relaxing and smoother in terms of if you've never been before, because Disney can be particularly daunting, especially if you've maybe only got a week to do it in. You'll be rushing around all over the place, so it is really helpful to sort sort of have this convenience. And one of the main things that is so convenient about being on property is the buses, because Disney have consistent, frequent buses that are completely free, and they just come with your hotel, that go to and from all the different parks, to and from all the different resorts, and there is going to be specific ones at each park and at your resort that are taking you between the two. This is something that's really, really, really helpful, and definitely makes it a lot more convenient for you for getting around. They're so frequent, they're like every 5 minutes, so you'll always find one, and it is also great that you can hop to different resorts if maybe you have friends and family staying at another resort, or you want to check out another resort maybe for another time you're visiting Walt Disney World. It also gives you the flexibility to do that. It means that you don't have to take ages getting yourself around to somewhere or trying to figure it out on a map or using your data on your phone to figure out where to go next. You can just get on the bus and it'll take you. And they're all very well signposted, it's really easy to find them. And as I say, they're just outside of every single park just before the beginning of the car park. So it's really, really easy to figure it out. So sort of looking at then, I guess, the con side of staying off property is that you do have to find your own way around. So that might be hiring a car, which obviously adds expense to your holiday, or utilising Uber or the iDrive trolleys that they have, which are extremely cheap actually, so they can be a good saving grace, but you still would have to obviously make your way to them. Or perhaps using your hotel's transport itself, which is something that I'll just mention now. The last holiday I went on in 2016, I stayed at the Clarion Inn, and one of the benefits of staying there was that they have their own transport that takes you to and from the parks in the morning. They're off property, yet they still provide this service for free, which was really nice. The only issue was it was nowhere near as good as the Disney buses. They had a set time in the morning to get to Magic Kingdom and a set time to come back from it. It was always like 11 PM or 1 AM in the morning or something ridiculous, and the first bus left at like 7 AM and that was about it. They didn't have very frequent ones going to and from the other parks because obviously Magic Kingdom was kind of their main one. They did definitely have one to Epcot, but you always had to then factor in times of having to get a Disney bus from the park that you've been dropped off at with the Clarion Inn's own transport and then get yourself to wherever you wanted to be. So we did like some of the water parks and stuff, and we wouldn't get there till 10 AM, and by this point you've already lost an hour of being in the park. So we did find this kind of annoying. It also meant rushing like mad at the end when the park closes to get to the bus, because it never ever had enough seats for everybody. Yeah, so you just had to kind of scramble to get on the bus, and we found this really, really tiring, and in a way it kind of ruined the trip a little bit. We still really enjoyed ourselves, but it just meant that you were constantly having to think about, oh, we can't do this because we're going to have to catch that bus at the time, and we're going to have to leave the park at this time. Whereas if you're staying on property, the buses will be running well after the park closes anyway, they just do in general, and you'll always be able to find one, and it's in with about 10 minutes. Having said that, the buses do get extremely busy sometimes, especially if you are leaving the park at close along with every other person, and I have also found and tested this one out, that if you are staying at a value resort, which is things like the Art of Animation, Pop Century, and all of the all-star resorts as well, and that these typically are the busier buses because a lot more people stay at them, and they're also a higher capacity hotel. Therefore these are going to have really long queues to get home to hotel from certain parks at closing, so you do want to consider that if you're maybe trying to get back very quickly. That might be something that will hold you up. You might still want to leave the park a little bit earlier, or you just got the opportunity to wait because there will be buses coming every 10 minutes. So there is pros and cons to both, but in terms of that convenience, sometimes it is more beneficial to stay on property, and I would definitely recommend that in terms of the buses, that it is very useful if you are a first-time traveller to Walt Disney World. So that is something to be aware of. Just sort of related to that, you can still use Disney buses even if you are not staying on property. They don't check that you have room keys or anything like that. They are still available. If you bought a ticket to Disney, you technically still can utilise all of their amenities and things that they offer. So keeping in with the theme of the buses, there is so much to sort of like try and pack into this video. One of the great things that Disney also offer, and as a pro for staying on site, is that you can utilise the Magical Express, which is a free bus service if you're staying on property, that will take you from Orlando International Airport all the way to your resort. There will be a number of different people on this bus, and they'll take you to the different resorts that are related to the people obviously on the bus, but you don't then therefore have to worry about getting the 30-minute drive from the airport to your resort, and also vice versa from your resort back to the airport when your vacation is finished. And that is something that is extremely helpful, especially again if you've never been before. It also means that you don't have to pay for parking. So if you do rent a car whilst you're at Walt Disney World, you will have to, on a daily basis, pay for car parking, which can be ridiculously expensive. The price keeps going up, so I don't know as of now what the current price is. I can find out and just pop it above. But yes, that's something that you get to save on quite significantly. So whilst you might find that the price for your hotel perhaps is a little bit higher than if you're going to stay off property, and that is one of my pros for staying off property, but you might find that with all the expenses of getting a car, hiring the car, paying for the insurance on the car, and then also having to pay parking every single time you go into the park, which, let's face it, will be every single day of your vacation, somewhere or another, you're going to start to see these costs rising and rising, and therefore it may end up not really being very much cheaper. So sometimes it might just be worth sort of spending that little bit more and staying on property. So that is a definite pro of staying on property at Disney. So moving on to one of the pros specifically for staying off property, you really do get the freedom to decide how you want to spend your vacation. One of the sort of like terms that everybody's aware of is this Disney bubble, and you do find that if you utilise all of Disney's free services like the Magical Express and the buses and all that kind of thing, you'll never ever leave Disney property. For a start, you won't have the means to be able to do so unless you get an Uber because you don't have the car, and also Disney don't transport you anywhere else, they just transport you within Disney property, because why would they send you elsewhere? So you would find that being on site, you're not going to get that freedom, whereas being off site, you have the opportunity to go and actually explore Orlando because it has so much to offer. It has iDrive, which has loads of stuff like Ripley's Believe It or Not Museum, there's now the Orlando Eye, there's the Science Centre, and also, obviously, there is Universal Studios and Islands of Adventure, which Disney don't transport you to, and it is a little bit of a drive away. There's also SeaWorld, which is, I think, the other way to Universal, so you're going to sort of be darting all over the place. And staying off property does give you this freedom to be able to go and explore other places, and especially if this is perhaps your first time going and you have quite a few weeks out there, you're probably going to want to do as much as you possibly can, and therefore it might be beneficial for you if Universal, SeaWorld, that kind of thing is sort of in your plans. Okay, so another pro of staying off-site, and it's something that I just slightly touched on before, is that typically, and it is sort of the main reason people stay off-site, is that it does tend to be that staying off-site is a lot cheaper than actually staying on Disney property. If you look on sort of the Disney website, you will find that the prices tend to be rather steep in comparison to some of the other hotels off property, and then therefore this is something that if you're wanting to try and do it a little bit more of a budget, you might find it's more beneficial for you and for your family or whoever you're travelling with to stay off-site. So this is something to consider. However, as I sort of tried to touch on before, you kind of need to take into consideration all the costs that you're going to go into. So for example, like I mentioned, there's also the cost of a car to consider and having to pay for parking at every single place that you go to. And these things start to rack up. You've also got the cost of food. Perhaps if your bed and breakfast isn't included together, you might have to pay for breakfast separately each day, which the Disney hotels actually provide bed and breakfast where you stay, so you'll always have your breakfast meal included. And you might also go out off property more to have meals in an evening, which can be cheaper than staying on property, but obviously there's this to contend with. So it does tend to be a lot cheaper, but I would just say maybe create a budget, sort of have a look and see all the different things that you need to consider, and work out what actually works out cheaper for you and your family or other people you're travelling with, because depending on sort of how many people there are in your party, the different things that you're wanting to do, you will find that there's different variations in price. Flipping over to the other side and looking at sort of a pro of Disney in terms of its cost value, Disney is really easy for you in terms of wanting to book a package holiday. Especially for us in the UK, we have a website, disneyholidays.co.uk, which for us allows you to book your hotel, the tickets and your flights depending on how early in advance you're booking. Obviously if you're going to book now for next year, you obviously can't book your flights yet, so you'd have to consider that, and the earlier that you do it, obviously the cheaper it's going to be. But that's something that Disney tries to provide as a convenience for you, that you can just buy it all in one. And what makes it even better is something that I just touched on the other side, is that you can buy a Disney dining plan, which means that all your meals are included. So obviously your breakfast is already included in your hotel cost, but it also means that you therefore also then get your lunch and your dinner and snack provisions every single day, and you've already paid for it. So you literally could go like no spending money. Obviously you're going to buy a heck of a lot of souvenirs while you're out there, but you physically, in sort of reality, you could just go with no money and you wouldn't have to pay for anything else because you've already paid for your Disney meals. They offer a number of different services, including the quick service plan, which you just get a shorter number of meals a day. That you get one meal and a snack a day, whereas if you go for the Disney dining plan, you'll get 2 meals and a snack. And there's also the deluxe dining plan, which I haven't looked at, but I think it means that you get more options in terms of restaurants that you can go to. Like I think it includes Victoria and Albert's and stuff like that as well within your dining plan, because you'll have paid more, so you can go to the more up-end restaurants. So that might be something that's worth looking for you. I will say that you will never go hungry if you choose the Disney dining plan. Personally, as an individual, I don't normally go for it, whereas my sister, every single time she's gone, she utilises the Disney dining plan because it just makes it a lot easier, and you already know that all your costs are paid for up front, you're done, you don't have anything else to worry about, and you can take all your spending money and that can just be spent on buying stuff that you really don't need. So they find that a lot easier to sort of manage and to budget for. So that's probably something that you might want to consider as well. And again, put this into your budget, see what works out as a cheaper alternative for you depending on who it is you're travelling with and what you actually want to do during your holiday. So another pro of staying on Disney property is that it's a lot easier to change your plans. And again, I sort of mentioned that Disney's pros are all very related to convenience and trying to make it as easy and smooth sailing as possible for you on a vacation, which is exactly what you want. You want it to be stress-free, and Disney do provide this opportunity. And so in terms of making it easier to change your plans, it again links into things like the buses. You might have a decision that you want to go to a certain park during the day, so you head there for sort of park opening, let's say it's Magic Kingdom, and then somebody within your party says, oh, I really want to go on this ride, but it's at a different park, or somebody says, I just want to go out to the hotel because I'm really tired and the sun's getting too hot for me, that kind of thing. Again, the buses and things like that make it a lot more convenient for you to be able to just quickly change your plans and decide to go elsewhere, do something else. Whereas for me, for example, when I was staying at Clarion Inn last year, I wouldn't have been able to do that. There were physically no buses that would take me back during the day for me to be able to actually go back to my hotel. Not that I was ever going to do that because I was there for a week and I was going to be there from park open to close, but we never would have had that opportunity. We would have had to pay for a taxi or an Uber, which can get certainly very pricey depending on who it is you're going with. There's a taxi company that literally just go around Orlando and they're not the cheapest of things. Uber's definitely cheaper. That is my number one tip for you. Always get an Uber. But staying on Disney property definitely does make it easier for you to change your plans and make up different ideas depending on sort of the day itself and how your family or friends or whoever it is you're travelling with feels, which definitely does make it a lot easier and makes it for a more relaxing holiday as well, which is definitely something that you probably want to achieve. Okay, so moving over again back to sort of the pros of staying off-site. I'm just going to finish off with the 2 that I have on here, and then I'll scoot back over to the very number 1 thing that Disney has going for it. So I think I touched on it slightly before with regards to the hotels itself off property, but there's 2 things I have found. Number 1 is sort of an obvious thing, there's more choice. So if you're definitely brilliant at sort of like looking for bargains and doing all your research, which I know I definitely am, in terms of when I'm booking a holiday, I want to make sure I get it completely right. There is a heck of a lot more choice for you in terms of the hotels. You could do Airbnb, you could do apartments, you could do villas. They have all these different opportunities and you can find them at better prices depending on who it is you travel with. Perhaps you go with Thomas Cook or another airline or package holiday or that kind of thing. And they will obviously have different deals and things as opposed to what Disney currently have. So that definitely does give you more flexibility in terms of tailoring your holiday towards exactly what it is that you and your party would like, whereas Disney perhaps don't have as much option other than having the value, moderate and sort of deluxe hotels. That's sort of where that encompasses everything. They don't really have a lot of options other than that. And secondly, with regards to the hotels as well, and something that I have found while staying off property and on property, I tend to find that off property is a little bit quieter. And the transport is a little less busy. I know obviously I said with Clarion Inn you did have to get there on time to make sure that you got on the bus. They did have 2 buses running on an evening for Magic Kingdom, but I did just always find that the transport was a little bit quieter because I would normally stay in a value resort if I could. If I'm staying on property, just because that's something that would be within my budget. And as I've said, I have got onto the buses to get from a park to Pop Century so I could get the bus back to Clarion Inn Hotel off property, and I used to find that you would never be able to get on the first bus for that when park's closing because it was just rammed, and people would be like pushing to try and get through. It was just a bit of a nightmare. And I also tend to find that the hotels are a lot quieter when staying off property, just because there's so much more choice and therefore everybody isn't crammed into one place. And if that's something that you really need to consider, whether you don't like a lot of noise in your hotel, that might be something to think about when sort of making your decision as to stay on or off property. But that's just from my personal experience. Obviously that's not going to always be the case, and certainly if you are able to stay in a moderate or deluxe hotel / resort at Disney, you will also find that they're a lot quieter as well, because as I say, the value tends to be the ones that are the most popular. So that's also something to consider as well. So those are, I think, all the pros that I have for staying off property, and I'm just going to now mention the number one valuable one I personally think for staying on property, and that is extra magic hours. So if you stay on Disney property, depending on what days it is, how busy the parks are expected to be around that time and things, you may have the opportunity to get into parks earlier, technically before it opens, if you're staying on property. And this is something that's extremely useful, especially if you're maybe only there for a short period of time, for a weekend even, or just for the week. You might find that this is something that you particularly benefit from, because obviously you can get on a lot of rides within that first hour with nobody being there. And they'll either have them running in the morning from like 8 till 9 AM, let's say, for Magic Kingdom, or from like 10 till 11 PM at night if the park, let's say, shuts at 10 PM. So there's 2 options there depending on what suits your party. So that's definitely a number one for me for staying on property, other than the buses, because they really are like the biggest help ever. But having extra magic hours is a definite perk that just makes you feel a little bit better about spending quite that much money on staying on Disney property. So that is it. That's all my pros and cons / pros and cons for on-site and off-site. Hopefully it wasn't too jumbled for you. I might just leave sort of the general pros and cons down below, just so that it might make it a little bit easier for you, but hopefully this was a little bit helpful for you in making a decision as to whether you should stay on or off property. There is no right or wrong, it obviously just depends on you and the party that you're going with as to what's better in terms of making your vacation the most relaxing and convenient and easy thing as possible, especially if you haven't been before. So with that being said, I hope you enjoyed this video and found it very useful, but until next time, I will see you later. Bye!